Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Jeff Edwards. I am participating in Barnyards and Backyards live today. We are glad that you joined us. My co-host today is Jeremiah Bardaman, Extension Educator in Park County. And our guest today is Catherine Wissner. She is also from UW Extension. She is the horticulturist in Laramie County, located in Cheyenne. And we are still extending a little bit more of our discussion on planting gardens and growing things, and we will get into that in a moment. Just wanted to remind you that we have the ability to take questions. If you're new to Zoom, if you scroll over the top of Zoom, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. You can click on that and enter your question there, and one of us will pick it up and ask it. You can also ask questions on Facebook Live. And Jenny Thompson will be watching those and monitoring those and bringing those questions forward. I also want to mention Jenny Thompson. She's the one that's behind the B&B logo that keeps us straight and keeps us on task and keeps us going. So thank you, Jenny. Good morning to you all. Did I forget anything this morning, Jeremiah?
No, I don't think so. I think you nailed it once. So we're getting better at this.
All right. And I meant to say aloha.
Yes. Yeah. So just like in our chat box, in the Q&A box, we just got a comment that as I watch the snow coming down, you guys are my antidote for cabin fever. And so, yeah, we're snowing here in Powell, Wyoming. And so I decided to change my location to something more tropical today. So
fantastic.
Yeah. So let's get started.
Let's get started. Catherine, what's on your mind today? What would you like to talk about and share with everybody?
Well, good morning, Jeff, and I'd like to talk about seed starting and planting seeds, since there seems to be a huge interest in doing that. And I do have a little PowerPoint program. Oh, Jeremiah, I like your background. That's kind of appropriate. Spring is just around the corner. So I'm going to get on and share my screen. Hopefully. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So, gardening has not been canceled. That's the good news. Gardening has not been canceled. Gardening should be fun and easy to do. It should be an enjoyable, therapeutic, outdoor activity for the whole family. And there are some rules to follow that are really important. And one of them is you need to read the seed packet, because the seed packet has an incredible wealth of information on it, from what temperature that seed likes to start at, how cold the soil can be or how warm the soil should be, the depth that you need to plant the seed, how far apart you need to space it. Germination rate, days to germination. This is important to know, especially for tomatoes and peppers and your warm season plants. Your cool season plants, usually that days to harvest or days to maturity is from the time you plant the seed. There's exceptions, of course, like anything with vegetable gardening, there's exceptions. And it also talks about some of the fertilizer needs that these plants have. Corn, for example, likes a lot of fertilizer. Squash is a little bit more, a little bit goes a long way. So does with peppers and your tomatoes. So what depth do you want to plant those seeds at? And so, Catherine,
again, I'm going to interrupt you. When we were preparing for this session this morning, you mentioned that your husband had gone out with a rototiller and tilled in some dry beans. Is that correct?
Yes, he did.
And how deep did he till them into?
They went down 8 inches, a full 8 inches.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is the seed packet is the optimal guideline, but there can be some variation in that instruction depth, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And so it really surprised me.
I'm sorry. So the seeds that he did incorporate with the rototiller actually germinated in your garden.
They germinated, and I think it just goes to show the tenacity of green beans, and they want to grow.
So how did he do that? Can you kind of give us a step-by-step of how that process worked?
So at the end of the vegetable season, I haul all the debris out, right? I try to get everything. Well, there's always going to be something that escapes. And in this case, it was some green beans that I hadn't harvested, had fallen to the ground. I really didn't pay a lot of attention to that as I hauled everything out. Next spring, so they sat on the ground for a full winter. Next spring, I let my husband loose with the rototiller, and he's only allowed to go rototill. He's only allowed to do 2 laps with the rototiller. And so if you overwork the soil, you end up with a net loss of organic material, and you can have some soil compaction going on, but you end up with a net loss of organic material.
So you have a governor on your husband while he's rototilling, is what you're saying.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So he's not allowed to do sports rototilling, and so he gets 2 laps.
We refer to that as recreational rototilling.
Yes. So, yeah, exactly. He gets 2 laps, and then he's got to stop. And so he's always a little bummed about that, because he's a farmer at heart. And he buried that seed 8 inches. And I would have never have guessed it would have come up, but it did. It got enough water. The soil was cool. I'm on a very sandy loam soil, so it's a cool soil, almost a cold soil. But it had enough moisture. I use a drip irrigation system, and so the water was able to get deep enough, and it germinated at 8 inches, and it came up. And I was so surprised about it that I actually tried to dig down to the roots to find out where it was, and it was 8 inches down. So,
crazy.
So some stuff you can get away with like that, but not everything. You can get away with that with corn. Corn you can plant 2 inches deep. It's happy a little deeper. But some of these other little guys, and so if you look at this picture of the seeds here, this guy right here, that's alyssum seeds. So alyssum is a flower. It's an annual flower. It's one of the, if you're going to put flowers in your vegetable garden, and you should, alyssum is a good one. It attracts the seraphid fly, and that fly goes after some other bad insects. So this is a good one to have. This seed only wants to be put right on the surface with just a little bit of soil, not much, just a little bit. And I've actually got some growing. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but so I've started some, and it's come up. It's very fine looking, but it just was right on the surface.
I think to see it real well,
Peppers,
Catherine, you probably have to stop sharing your screen.
Oh yeah, okay.
Can see it. Your window would be a little bigger. So when you're done with your presentation, we can maybe look at it.
Yep.
While we have a break here, Catherine, we do have a question in the chat box, and it might be a little early, so however you want to handle it. But Annie asked the question, when you take the soil temperature, do you do it to the recommended planting depth that you're talking about? So that's a question. If you want to answer it now, we can, or we can answer that a little bit later in your presentation.
I try to. So I try to only put and I use just a meat thermometer, an inexpensive, go to Walmart, go to Sam's Club, whatever, buy the cheapest one you can find, because you're going to put it in the soil and you're not going to ever use it in the house again. And so I just put that meat thermometer an inch down into the soil and take that temperature. And so that's how I know if it's 65 degrees or 45 degrees, and it helps me know what to plant. I can put peas in. Peas like it cold. Fava beans like it cold. I can plant carrots that early. Beets. There's a whole bunch that really like cool soil. Then there's a whole group that thinks cool soil is pretty hateful.
That don't.
But yeah. So in other words, if you go barefoot through your vegetable garden, and your feet get cold, then it's probably too cold for your warm season plants. And okay,
So
tools for seed planting.
So, sorry, Catherine, the corn growers in my area used to say that if you could sit out on the soil and not feel uncomfortable, then you could plant your corn.
Yeah, that's another good one. Yeah, if you can walk barefoot and your feet don't freeze, then you're okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have another question, Catherine, and it's a little bit off topic, but I'll just throw it to you so you can handle it however you want. So I don't see who this one is from,
Is this one?
but the question is, this is what I was curious about. Our soil is quite clay bound. Do I or should I believe that we need to add sand to that? So we can either handle that question later, or we can tackle it now.
Okay, I'll tackle it now. So it depends upon the sand you want to add. If you add playground sand, you're going to make bricks. Not a good thing, ever. If you use masonry sand, which is sharp and pointy, it's a rough sand, you can get away with a little bit of it, but you really are leaning towards some huge problems by adding sand. And so the caveat is always to add compost. But what is compost? And I'm going to try not to get on my soapbox about manure. You never want to add manure to your vegetable garden for a whole host of reasons. So good compost, straw, leaves. If you live in town and you have a lot of trees, you want to catch those leaves and hold them and incorporate your leaves, tree leaves, into your garden soil. Coffee grounds. God, coffee grounds are magical in a clay soil. They really help amend the soil and make it better. So non-manure based compost, kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, tree leaves, grass clippings are going to be beneficial. Peat moss is amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that question was from Tom in Riverton. So thanks, Tom, for the question. Yeah, and so we want to go with anything organic, and it can be aged manure. Is that correct, Catherine? Just not fresh green manure?
No manure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, manures, and especially in a clay soil, adding manure, you always hear, well, the manure's hot. Well, what does that mean? It's not the nitrogen, because manures are very, very low in nitrogen. I mean, pathetically low in nitrogen, but they're really high in salts. And you don't want to add a salty compost or salty manure to clay soil. You cause irreparable damage that you're not going to ever turn around.
Great.
So no manures.
Okay, so we got our soil prep. So what's our next step?
Okay, so once your soil is prepped and you've only rototilled, you haven't engaged in recreational rototilling, you've gone 2 laps. I usually rake it smooth, figure out where I want to plant everything. So have a map, have a plan, put down, where your tomatoes are going to go, your peppers, your carrots, your beets, your lettuce, and your sweet corn, whatever you're growing. Oh, and by the way, you can grow, for everyone out there who's from the South or likes okra, okra grows really well in Wyoming. It does quite well. And in fact, it'll do well enough that you won't be able to pick it fast enough. Go figure. So you want to prep your soil, get it smooth, get a map, get a plan, know where you're going to put everything in. And that map is critical, because next year you need to rotate that garden. You don't ever want to plant the same thing in the same place. So you want a 3 or 4 year rotation, and that map is going to guide you on that rotation plan.
Wait a minute, Catherine. You mean you can't remember from one year to year what you plant, where you plant your stuff?
Well, at the height of my vegetable gardening foray, I had a 5,000 square foot vegetable garden. I had 2 high tunnels going. And so I found a map to be a really handy tool.
Sure.
And when I teach the master, yeah.
I agree. It's an important thing to keep track of where you plant things. And, my wife and I debate, did we have the tomatoes there or not? And so I understand.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's a good exercise to do in the wintertime, right? When you can't be growing and planting, you can be searching the seed catalogs, planning out next year, being active in gardening, even though you're not outside doing it, right?
Absolutely. And when I teach the Master Gardener program, one of the exercises they get to do is put pencil to paper and design a vegetable garden. And then they get to hand it in. And then I hand it back to them and tell them to plant it. But it's a handy tool to have. And it's really important to keep families together. So in other words, your tomatoes, your peppers, your eggplant, your okra are one family. And so they're going to get planted close together so you can rotate them to a different location. And so you want to keep that rotation going just so you don't cause soil fertility problems or get diseases built up in the soil. And, just variety in life anyway. Mix it up. Have fun with that. But so once I have my plan down and I know where my rows are going to be, and I'll actually take twine and I'll lay out the rows, because I can't even walk a straight line, much less plant a straight line. So I use twine. And so I'll mark out where I want my rows.
And that's for the OCD people that really care that their rows are straight. But did you really know that a crooked row actually has more plants in it?
So, yeah, and because I can't do a straight rows, I use twine to mark out where I'm going to go, and and then I leave it there, and it also helps me know where that plant is supposed to be at. But I use other tools. I use drip tape for my irrigation, because it's important to keep that water where the plant is. Keep the water at the roots, at the soil line. And when you start spraying water in the air like this with a sprinkler system, you're going to have more diseases, you're going to have more weeds, and no one wants to spend their summer afternoon pulling weeds in the vegetable garden, right? That's not fun.
For our newer gardeners, do you have your sample of drip tape handy that you can hold up and talk about it a little bit, since you mentioned it?
I do. Do you want me to stop sharing? And I'm just such a technology person. Okay.
Oh, you're doing great.
So, okay. So, drip tape. It's this long flat thing, and there's about every 8 inches on this one, there's a little emitter. And so it's kind of a controlled leak, and it leaks out water, and this one is 1/2 gallon an hour. So
that's a good way to describe it, a controlled leak.
It's a controlled leak. It's easy to install. It's you have to have a pressure regulator on here, because it's really easy to create a garden water feature with too much water pressure. and so you really want to have a pressure regulator on there. And anyway, this is a straight line. And so I can plant. So the cool thing about this stuff is that I can plant on both sides of this drip tape. So I can have a row of carrots here, and then I can put a row of beets over here, or I can do carrots and I can do onions. So this gives me a lot more. If I have a small garden, I just doubled the size of my garden. So this is very cool stuff to use. And the same thing with soaker hose. Soaker hose, you can do curves with soaker hose.
A circular garden.
You can do, yeah. So if you don't have a rectangular or square garden, or you don't want to have one, you can use soaker hose. And this stuff is flexible. I've used it a lot. It doesn't last long. This is good for maybe about 3 years before this material clogs up. And if you've got real hard water, it'll clog up sooner than later. And I recommend a pressure reducer on these too, because I've blown these out in the past.
Soaker hose is a controlled leak as well, but there's more leaks in the line.
Yeah, it leaks everywhere.
It leaks a lot.
It leaks a lot, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't know how much water you're leaking. Right.
Right.
And so that's where you have to really pay attention to the soil and what the soil feels like. So my favorite garden tool is a flat bladed screwdriver. And don't use your husband's good one because that creates a lot of tension. So I have this old wooden handled rusty thing that my husband doesn't care about.
Or buy him a new
about.
screwdriver and take his old one.
You could do that for sure. But I know what the depth, and so this is also my planting tool. So if I need to make a row for carrots, I just use this. And I always use I try to always use the pelletized carrot seed so that I know, and they come in colors, so I can see where they're at in the soil and I can space my carrots precisely. But my favorite garden tool, and so when I need to know what the soil moisture level is, I can put this down in there, and usually it's kind of like, for everyone who bakes cakes, when you test your cake and you put the toothpick in there and it comes out moist. Well, same thing with the screwdriver. So that is my favorite garden tool. I don't think it even costs me anything. So
found it somewhere.
My husband's toolbox, probably. I like these hand trowels, and they come with little measurements on them. So this is an inch, so I can make an inch deep furrow for my corn, and I can go even smaller for some of the other stuff. So those are some of my favorite tool, my favorite gardening tool.
So I'm going to derail you again, Catherine. Okay. I apologize. So in our prep time, you mentioned that your corn had germinated. You actually start your corn inside and transplant it into your garden. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I was just talking about this yesterday in a program that we did, and the individuals that we were having the conversation were like, "You can't do that with sweet corn." Well, just tell a master gardener that you can't do something, right? And now this is a little bit off topic, but can you explain to people how you start your sweet corn and how you transplant it?
Sure. Hang on.
Okay, please do. Is this new to you, Jeremiah?
No.
Okay. All right. It is to some.
So sweet corn, all this stuff is sweet corn. So my goal is to have sweet corn and tomatoes by the 4th of July.
Oh, wow.
In Wyoming.
Yeah, that's
and
usually
so
we try and say knee high at 4th of July, we're doing good, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I started in these trays, and you don't have to use anything fancy. This is a little more fussy, and the way I'll get this out, again, one of my garden tools is a fork, a long tined fork, and I'll just put the fork in there and I'll just gently lift it, and I'll have the soil prepped, I'll have the hole ready. I never plant anything into a dry hole, right? So you're going to take this and put it into a wet hole, and then just gently back. So it's a gentle process, because corn does not like to be handled. And normally you wouldn't start corn in a seed tray and transplant it, right? But I'm a geeky horticulturist, and I have a bunch of master gardeners who have taught me to never say never. After 18 years with master gardeners, you learn you never say never to a master gardener. And so again, I just use a fork that I'm not going to use again back in the house.
That you've actually removed from your silverware drawer at some point in time, right?
Yes, exactly. And I don't use the good ones. Right, yeah, old toolbox. And so I use that, and it works. It works pretty well. And so for anyone who's going to try this, it does work. It's fun to do. If you have cats think this is the tastiest thing ever. And about the time you're going, yes, I'm going to take it outside and transplant it, your cat will come along and graze it to the nubs. So you've got to be really careful with that, and have your gardening stuff separate from your cats. And so ask me how I learned that one.
So Catherine, when do you're in Laramie County, so when do you transplant that outside?
So I will actually go May 15th, knowing that the weather can be really schizophrenic, and then I've got to be ready to cover it. And so I have old sheets that I've gotten from thrift stores, and I use another product that's called Ramie or Spunbound floating roll cover. I'll use that too. And so I'll be ready to cover it. And so with vegetable gardening, there's a lot of micromanaging, and so I always tell my master gardeners when I teach this that you need to let your inner micromanager out and run loose, because you're going to be going out there and covering and uncovering, especially in the middle of May. So it's just kind of a fact of life in Wyoming, and we're a higher elevation here than a lot of other parts of the state, and but just be ready.
So how many weeks ahead of May 15th do you start your sweet corn?
Well, I started this sweet corn on the 7th of April, and part of it was based on what the seed packet was telling me, that it takes 7 to 14 days for corn to germinate. Mm-hmm. Well, this germinated in 3 days, and this is corn that I've stored in seed storage. Let's talk a little bit about seed storage, because this is something that bites a lot of people. And I find a lot of people think that they can store their seeds in their garden shed or their garage. And that is seed death, absolutely seed death. And so I tell my master gardeners that that's what your crisper drawer is for in your refrigerator, is for seed storage. Didn't know that, did you?
A plastic box down in your basement. That works really well.
Yeah. Or you can put it in your freezer. But the really important thing with storing seeds is it's got to be a cool or cold temperature, and it's got to stay consistent. And that does not describe your garage or your garden shed. And the garden shed gets hot, then it gets cold, it gets hot, and that's seed death, hands down. So if you've got seed that's in your garden shed, it's throw it away. It's not going to germinate.
So Catherine,
to be bad news. Yes.
Those early spring crops that you plant directly outside, which ones do you plant first, and when do you usually plant them?
Okay, so getting a jump on the season again. My goal is 4th of July, and I also want potato salad on the 4th of July, and I will plant as soon as we got another snowstorm coming through, and it's now snowing out my window. I'll get my potatoes, and I always buy certified seed potatoes. I don't ever use those potatoes that are sprouting in my refrigerator. You don't store potatoes in your refrigerator anyway. So if you got potatoes sprouting, mashed potatoes, make mashed potatoes, but don't plant them in your garden. So you're going to buy certified seed potato, and you can find them at your big box stores. Call your garden center, have them meet you at the curb with potatoes. And so if they're really big, you're going to cut them in half, let them air dry for a couple hours. And then I will start planting next week. And so potatoes will go in. And when you plant potatoes, you do a trough. I put my irrigation in there, whether it's my drip tape or my soaker hose, either one works. The irrigation is going to go in the bottom of that trough. I backfill it with a little bit of soil. I put the seed potato on top of that. And then I just cover it with enough soil so that I can't see the potato. So maybe an inch of soil. And I've had them snowed on. I've had them get a little frost. They're good. The trick with potatoes is fluffy soil. And so when I start to backfill it, I'll use leaves or straw, or I'll just make sure that soil is well amended and not hardened. You know, so the person with the
Like
clay
a clay.
soil,
Like a
yeah, the
heavy
person with the clay
compacted
soil,
clay or crusted clay. Yep.
yeah. So you're going to have to get some straw, peat moss, leaves, grass clippings, potting, you know, good potting soil, not just go get the cheap stuff. And just backfill it with that. And then you can amend your potting soil with some sand or some perlite. And so perlite is this is perlite. So you could actually get away with amending your, I guess you guys can see this. It's kind of a volcanic byproduct, and it adds a lot of airspace in there without causing compaction. So you could use that to amend your heavy soils with. Potatoes like it fluffy. So the potato seed itself likes cool soil. And so keeping that covered is really important. So that's why you mound up your potatoes. I mean, I've had master gardeners grow them in tires and in garbage bags and trash cans. I mean, they're not picky. What they're picky about is water, and potatoes need a lot of water. So vegetable gardens aren't drought tolerant at all. And you can't skimp on water in your vegetable garden. And so I'm kind of jumping around on my program, so sorry about that.
We got a few questions here, Catherine.
That's our fault.
Whenever you're ready.
That's all right. But your best employee and your best friend in your vegetable gardener is a timer. And this timer comes on and goes off reliable. I'm not reliable, and I've been vegetable gardening since I was 12. And I either walk away and flood my garden, or I go, oh, I should have watered it. And you can't get away with, oh, I should have watered it in a vegetable garden. You've got to have consistency, and consistency is what's going to give you big crops, big yields. So for every pound of potatoes you plant, you should be getting 10 pounds back. Your harvest should be 10 pounds for every 1 pound planted. And this is how you're going to do it. This also allows you to, I mean, if we ever get to leave our properties, this is going to allow you to go away for a weekend or take that week-long vacation, because this is reliable. Your neighbor kid is not. The neighbor kid, you're going to come home and your garden's going to be wet with dead plants, but not with this.
Overwatered, right?
So Catherine,
Yeah.
what are
It's
some of
overwatered
the
on the last day of your vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
go? What are some of the other crops that folks can think about getting ready to plant here before too long? Things like some of the leafy greens, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. You can plant your spinach, your arugula, your lettuces. You can plant all that stuff now. I'll plant carrots next week, even knowing that the soil is cold, but they'll tolerate cold soil. So that's going to be okay. The seeds will take probably 3 weeks to germinate. But again, that's okay. Beets will take a little longer to germinate. Peas, any of your peas, these guys love cold soil, and they'll come up. 45-degree soil. Snow peas.
So
Dami will come.
We got 7 questions in our chat box, so let's kind of catch up on a few of these. So getting back to the drip tape.
So
okay.
They've never seen it for sale. Where can they get that?
So there are multiple sources of drip tape now, and I think what we'll do to best answer that is to provide a list and a link with Jenny as a resource at the end. So check back. Jenny, what is the...
So you can go to our Barnyards and Backyards site. Just you Google Barnyards Backyards Wyoming, and then there'll be a link on the side that says live, and it's for this program. If you click on that, there'll be another one for recordings, and you click on that, and we'll have this recording and a whole bunch of other resources for folks to look at there.
So
Right.
we'll create a list of sources for those and drop that out there for you.
So another question, Catherine, is back to the soil temperature topic.
Okay.
Do you take
I
the
saw-
temperature in the early morning, or do you average those temperatures throughout the day? I'm wondering when I can plant cold weather things. So I think you've answered that, but just when do you take that soil temperature?
So I have a fleet of meat thermometers that I leave at strategic locations throughout my vegetable garden. And I'll just throughout the day, I just check it. Morning, it's obviously going to be cold, cooler. Afternoon is going to be warmer. That's great. But I usually base it on what I see in the morning.
Great.
So if it's 45 degrees in the morning, I'm good. I'm good with it. Yeah.
Great.
So I saw a question pop up. Almost any place.
Stephanie writes, where did you get the water thing?
Yeah, the water thing. This is a
The
water timer.
Right.
My timer. You can buy them online, Amazon, garden centers, big box stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, Murdoch's, Baumgartner's,
Okay.
Pamita. I mean, they're all out there. Yeah, they're not expensive. You know, it takes a battery, easy to program. You're your best friend in the garden.
Another question is, I was thinking of planting potatoes in a wire tower. What are your thoughts there? Maybe adding a mixed layer of straw and dirt?
Yep, works. Stay consistent with your water, really. When people tell me they get these little tiny potatoes and they don't know why, they didn't water it enough. You know, or they only got a couple pounds of potatoes, little tiny potatoes, and they didn't water enough. The potatoes are thirsty. So just understand that if you're going to do it in a container like a wire basket, which is fine, I've done those before, you just have to stay on top of your watering. And so make a list, make a schedule, whatever, but the water is critical. Water is critical.
Another question from Barbara Hernandez. I am new to this, so where would I get perlite?
Where would you get fertilizer?
No, perlite.
Perlite.
Perlite. Oh, perlite.
Yep.
Yeah, the white stuff. I get it at the big box stores, and it comes in a big bale, a big bale, and it costs under $20. But the big box stores like Lowe's, Home Depot, your garden center should have some. Walmart might have some.
Home Depot, Lowe's, anywhere that has a garden center potentially could carry perlite.
Yep.
Okay. Great.
And oftentimes the big box stores will have small little bags, and so if you want a bigger one, you can, if you have a local or regional nursery, they oftentimes have larger ones.
And I usually buy several bags of the big ones, and I use it for other reasons, but when I start my seeds, I make my own seed mix. And so that's perlite, peat moss, and then potting soil. And because that seed starting soil has got to be light, but not so light that it's just pure peat moss. And I've run into some that's just almost pure peat moss, and that's hard. That is a really hard medium to grow seeds in. It's challenging. It dries out.
Catherine,
we got a
we
few
have
more
one on.
questions. Do we want to take those before the video, or do we need to get back to the presentation? Where
I
would
think
you
we'll
like to go?
ask this one of Catherine. It's from Facebook. So, and it's a really pertinent question based on what we were discussing before the program even started. She was asking, will there be seed and plants available at the nursery this year?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I ventured out, and Home Depot has the whole array of seeds, and Walmart has seeds. So all the big box stores have seeds. The grocery stores have seeds. Down in Cheyenne, we've got, just a minute.
I'm guessing the local nurseries will probably have seeds too. We are seeing them in the communities, so it's they are available.
Yeah,
So
they're there. The seed companies, so trying to call any of the seed companies like Territorial, Johnny's, Baker Creek, I mean the whole alphabet of seed companies, they've been overwhelmed, and they've most part shut down their sites, and they're not taking new orders. But you can find seed in the big box stores. So I'm going to kind of jump a little bit on the topic and go to back to the packet and talk about seed packets. The big box stores like to sell us sweet corn that's called Silver Queen, and it's almost 90 days. And I know that on the packet it says you start counting from when you plant that seed, but that's not really correct for Wyoming. And so you really have to start counting those days to maturity once you see it at transplant size. And transplant size, what I've got back there is not transplant size. Transplant size is going to be about 4 inches tall. So that's another 2 weeks out. So you need to add 28 days to that days to harvest. And so sweet corn called Silver Queen, which they look at our growing season and go, we have a 90-day growing season, so this is great. No, it's not. You want to find sweet corn that's got a really low number, like in the 60s, maybe 70s, and then just know that it could take a while. But really read that seed packet. There's tons of information on the seed packet that's really important. And so a lot of the seed companies are still telling people to hill, make a hill, plant on a hill. I'm going to tell you not to. Don't hill. That hill dries out really quickly. It's hard to water. It's hard to keep moist. And it's based on your flood irrigating, or you've got the sprinkler system that's throwing water all over the place, which is really inefficient. So you want to avoid that and keep everything on the ground. Use your drip tape or your soaker hose and skip the hilling. Don't make more work for yourself. Vegetable gardening should be fun, should be rewarding. And if you're throwing water all over the place, you're going to be weeding all summer. That's not fun. Sucks.
Catherine, we got a couple questions on seeds. So I haven't seen okra seeds in the stores. Where do you find that?
I have seen it at some of the big box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's. Otherwise, you got to mail order it. And right now there's one seed company that is still taking orders. And so if you let me quick jump and grab that catalog, I can give you the information if you'd like. Hang on.
We can, okay.
You could add that to the end.
We could add that at the end.
Yeah. Okay. We'll add that at the end. But you can buy okra seed and yeah.
The other question we had is, do you think pelleted seeds have better germination rates? I have super old pelleted seed and they still work really well.
Yeah, as long as you've stored them correctly and you've kept them in a cool environment and not in your garden shed, they should be okay. I like pelleted seeds. They're easier, they're bigger to pick up and precisely plant. So yeah, I like those, especially carrot seeds that are pelletized. Yeah, it's the way to go.
Right. We're going to jump back to the perlite, right?
Okay.
So Jared asked, can we use vermiculite the same way?
So I don't like to use vermiculite because it compacts over time and it doesn't really fluff the soil like you would want to keep it fluffy. It's these plates and it can cause compaction over time. So I avoid that. Don't use it. If you've got it, go for it, but just know that it could cause compaction.
There are a couple other soils questions from over on Facebook. One person asked, I'm going to lay a couple on you at the same time, Catherine. One of them asked, what about eggshells for clay soil amendment? And then another person was saying that their friend has a greenhouse that has a lot of organic matter in the soil mix that's used in there, and they're having trouble watering it. And this came up last week in one of our conversations.
Okay, so eggshells, they do add organic material. Do they add calcium back to the soil? We never worry about calcium in Wyoming soils because we have an abundance of it. But they do add organic material. I throw them in there all the time. They crunch up real easily and kind of disappear over time. And then as far as trying to get that soil watered in the greenhouse, I guess it depends upon what they made it with. You know, what's in there that's causing it to not want to take on water. And
yeah, they said it had a lot of organic matter in it. Let me see if I can pull it up and read it to you.
Yeah, what's their
They
definition
say
of organic
my
matter?
friend's soil in their greenhouse has a lot of organic matter, compost in it, but they say it seems very dry and the water just goes straight to the bottom. What do they need to add to the soil to correct this?
You know, are they trying to grow just strictly in compost, you know, their kitchen scrap compost and organic matter? Because it's not going to hold moisture. You know, they need to get a good potting mix and mix some good soil in there, some good topsoil.
So your
so that it
suggestion
can
is they add
hold water.
topsoil.
Yeah, some good topsoil, not.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I'd go get some bags of some good potting soil and mix that in.
Even some native soil, like you're saying, but just get topsoil on that, so it has some substance that will hold that moisture.
Right, and I'd go to a real nursery to buy that topsoil, not a big box store. I'd go to whatever your local nursery is and buy from there, because they're going to have really good stuff. And for everyone who's up in the Riverton area, you've got Sprouts. They do a good job. They've got some good stuff.
Yeah, there's some really good suppliers around the state. You just have to look for it.
So
another soil question for you, Catherine. So
sure.
you did answer another question we had come through the Q&A, that you can crush up eggshells and put them in the soil and compost them and utilize them as organic matter in the soil.
Yep.
But we probably don't necessarily need the calcium that people talk about from eggshells, because we have very high calcareous soils in Wyoming, generally speaking.
Right. Right.
The other question is, this is from Lorraine, what is the best way to treat the soil with high alkaline, with a high alkaline soil, or the presence of high alkaline?
Welcome to Wyoming. They're all high alkaline.
Get a soil. Yeah, get a soil test. Absolutely critical. Go get a soil test, and you can. We were using CSU, Colorado State University, and your extension office should have something for you to put it in. At Laramie County Extension here in Cheyenne, we've got little jars and instructions, but you can just take a bag of soil and get on the Colorado State University website for soils. It's like $40, but they tell you exactly what you got. You'll know what your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium is. You'll know what the salt level is. You'll know what the pH is. And so when I get soil tests back, the first two things I look at is the salt level, which is EC, electric conductivity, because salt is conductive. So, and then I look at the pH. It tells me a lot right away what your soils are, but you're going to have to get a soil test to know what exactly to amend it with, because if you amend a high alkaline soil with manures and the manures are salty, you are going to be in a world of hurt. And my advice at that point, if you had amended manures in there, now you got high salts and a high pH, is to do raised beds or dig that soil out and start over. Yeah, it's not pretty when you have high salts and high pH.
Yeah, amend that pH, the alkaline soil, and depending on what you mean by high, we have soils here of pH of 8 or 9 here in the Bighorn Basin or higher. But most of it you can amend, but it's not cheap. At least to my understanding, it's not cheap to amend, and it's not long lasting.
Right.
In terms of the native soil, but if you're going to try and get away from it, and you can bring in like potting mix or something like that for like raised beds or other soils that are not as alkaline, correct?
Yeah. And if you have a real high alkaline soil, you're probably better off doing raised beds. Yeah, and there's a way to do raised beds and just have phenomenal yields out of them. So it's not a limiting factor.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got a few more questions in the Q&A, but we can continue on if you had other points that you needed to make, Catherine.
No, if there's some more questions, I'm love to hear the questions.
The next one is from Deb. Using the drip tape, how often do you water and how long?
Okay, good question. And so you need to know your soils. What are your soils? Heavy clay soil versus, I'm on a sandy loam. They're all going to take different amounts of time, and that's where your favorite soil moisture testing tool is going to come in handy. Again, I just poke it down in there, or if I really want to know, then I'll use this, and I'll dig up some soil and I'll find out what the soil moisture feels like down at the bottom, and so I'll check that way. Again, vegetables are not drought tolerant.
Yeah, so it also depends on the emitter type or the number of emitters per foot in that drip tape. So I actually use drip tape myself, and in our gardens, I usually allow them to run a half an hour every day. But I have 92% sand soil, so it drains really well. And it just depends on the season too. Early on in the season, I won't let it water so much, but then in the middle of the summer, when things are producing, I will turn that time up just a little bit longer. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to get a feel for and understand how much water is actually coming out of those drip tapes.
And the drip tape is not created equal, right? So
No,
they have different gallons per minute rates. They have different emitter spacings, all that kind of thing that you have to weigh into that factor in addition to your soil.
Correct.
So that's again where I mentioned earlier that you need to let your inner micromanager loose, and and check it. I mean, you should be out there checking your vegetable garden daily. And so on these guys, on my drip tape, and I love drip tape. I've had some drip tape now that I've been using for 15 years. So this is long lived. I've run some over with the lawnmower, and that really shortens its longevity. But but it's a long lasting, and hopefully you can see there's a seam right here. So you always want to put it seam side up, so that it leaks on the top of the tape and not down like that. There's only one exception for this, but you want it to seam every 8 inches. And so I pack the plants in. I know I can pack a lot of plants in using this method because the water is getting to the roots where it's needed. If you use an overhead sprinkler like this, you can't have as many plants per square foot, and so it limits you when you have and then you have weeds. Oh my God, you're going to have weeds like you wouldn't believe. And hopefully no one's amended their soil with horse manure. If you want a weed patch, use horse manure. Ugh, nasty.
Has to be really composted well to kill off the weed seeds that are in any manure, right, Catherine?
I have it's, in order to be composted well, it has had to reach 140 degrees. And weed seeds like bindweed, think that it's a day at the spa. And so there's a lot of weeds that you can't kill even at that thermal level. And it's got to be turned. And so I raise sheep, and so I have some manure piles out here. And if I scoop the bottom of that, which is where you go when you use that loader, I've just now scooped all where everything is drained. And so that's a huge concentration of salts. And I know there's weed seeds in there, and so that's just gardening, vegetable garden death using that stuff. So
going back to seed supply, we had one of our Facebook viewers that had a suggestion. They said that in some communities there are seed libraries where folks can get seeds, and I know we have one in Laramie, and I think there are a couple more around the state.
Yeah, so Gillette has a seed library, Cheyenne has a seed library. The problem with the Cheyenne seed library is that it's actually in the Laramie County Public Library, and they have closed the doors.
That's true.
And so access is kind of questionable. But yeah, there's some seed libraries, and I personally know that the one in Cheyenne is well managed, and I have some remarkable master gardeners that take care of that, and so they do a top-notch job with that one. But the library's closed. I'm sorry. You know, yeah. The extension office up in Park County, Bobby Holder, has got a seed program going, and so Jeremiah could probably answer that a little bit better. But there are some places to get seeds inexpensively or free. Yeah.
So another question for you, Catherine. What is your recipe for your seed starting mixtures? We want your dirty secrets.
Okay, my dirty secrets. I have all sorts of gardening secrets. I have my perlite, right? And I have peat moss. So I couldn't find my big bag of peat moss, but so I've got my peat moss, and then I have just regular gardening potting soil. So it's a 1 to 3, so 1 part perlite, 1 part potting soil, and 1 part peat moss. And I mix it up in a bin, and I add some water because it's dry. And peat moss, when peat moss dries out, that's hard to get rehydrated. Yeah. So I always keep it moist. I keep it in a bin with a lid. And so when I need to use it, if I need to add water, I just add some water to it. But that's what I use. And otherwise, anything else is too heavy. You really got to. That's just, if it dries out, it's hard to get rehydrated. And if at any point in your seed starting that it dries out, you just killed that seed, and you got to start over. So again, you got to let your inner micromanager off, and you really have to monitor the soil moisture. And so there's a lot of touching going on. Gardeners are very tactile people. They like to touch everything, and so this is where you get to touch the soil and see where the soil moisture is at. Yeah, easy to do.
and
you can make a mess,
art, right?
Yeah. Well, you can make a mess and justifiably. Yeah, exactly.
So we can give you all the science and all the answers, right? But it really then, to incorporate that and be able to do it on your own property, it becomes the art of knowing the plants you're growing, the method you're growing them in, the irrigation, and that becomes the art of being able to produce a good garden.
Yes. Yeah.
And we try to encourage our new gardeners, people who are trying this for the first time. It's okay to make mistakes. If you kill a few plants, feel bad about it, but then move on. Replant, try something else. Just try to grow things, and you'll be amazed at how easily you can grow things.
Yep, it is. If you go to the store to buy your tomato and pepper plants, don't buy the ones with tomatoes already on them, as tempting as it is. If you do buy one with a tomato on it, you want to take that tomato off. That's hard to do, but just get your scissors or pruners or whatever and just pull it off, get rid of it. Otherwise, that tomato plant is going to spend the whole season focusing on that one tomato, and you might get like 4 or 6 tomatoes off the whole thing. And so don't go that way. You want to harvest. And again, my benchmark for a lot of stuff, that tomato plant should be giving me 10 pounds back. And a couple years ago, I grew a tomato variety called Wins All. And you got to start it from seed. Tomatoes are easy peasy to start from seed, but that tomato plant gave me 50 pounds of tomatoes back. I did keep it on a drip system, got regular water, kept its roots warm with black plastic. So there's some tomato growing tricks out there, but that's when you want to, if you buy them and already started, no tomatoes on them or peppers.
Great. Yeah. Well, we're kind of coming down to the end of our show here, but is there any other questions before we jump off or sign off, or any other points that you would like to make, Catherine?
So I do. And this is a fun one. So for everyone out there who's got kids, this is fun. And you can do it in a container, or you can do it in your garden or a place in your garden. And I got the master gardeners up in Douglas to do this. But grow peanuts. You can grow peanuts in Wyoming. They're easy to do. They're fun for the kids. I just had comments that it's fun for adults too. But you want you don't want them to be roasted or salted. You want them raw, and you just plant the whole thing in the soil. Even moisture. They like warm soil. It's like what they grow in Georgia, right? So Georgia soils are very warm. They like warm soil. Plunk them in there, do them in a container, do them whatever. They send out these pretty little yellow flowers, and they send out these little pips, and they go down to the soil. And when those little pips hit the soil, that's where they make a peanut. So they're very shallow rooted plants. And at the end of the season, you pull them up, and it's just fun. It's fun for the kids to do. You can grow peanuts in Wyoming. And
it's just something different that we don't normally think of putting in our garden space or that, right?
Exactly. Try something new.
Right, exactly. So I try something new, and I've got I live in a Mennonite community area, and they grow sweet potatoes. They grow all sorts of fun stuff. So have fun, experiment.
That's great.
Don't worry about failing. I mean,
I
I've
thought
killed
I'd
a
pull
lot
up
of stuff.
The Barnyards and Backyards webpage, so
horticulture career. Don't
see where to go to find some information. So this is our Barnyards and Backyards page. This is the link I was talking about. It says live. You can click on that, and it'll pull up all the different shows we have coming up. And then if you push on the recording, it'll have all the recordings that we've done and all sorts of different types of information that may go along with that topic. So another thing I wanted to mention is that we also have a great deal of articles and other things you may find of interest. So if you just click on gardening on our homepage, it'll take you to a page that just has a ton of different information to cover gardening topics.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, and with that, we're just going to close up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We've had a lot of thank yous from you in the Q&A and in the chat box. We appreciate it. We're here to help you. We're here to answer your questions, be a resource for you. So please reach out, get in touch with us. Jenny, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, our contact page is there.
You bet. I was just trying to figure out how to do it most nicely.
Yeah. Well, this is one of my favorite topics. And so like Jenny said, like Jeremiah said, we're easy to get a hold of. You can find me, Laramie County Extension Facebook page. You can find me on our website, Laramie County Extension on the web. So I'm easy to get a hold of. Love talking about vegetable gardening, favorite topic.
As you can see on the page I just pulled up, on the left-hand side, that was the Barnyard site that I already showed you. But on the right-hand side, you'll see that if you Google University of Wyoming Extension, will find a link that'll take you to a page that has all the county offices on it. So Catherine's in the Laramie County office. We have other educators that are in the various offices around the state. So you can just go down and click on those and find the closest resource to you. So Jeremiah, are those offices still open now?
Yeah, we're still open.
Yep.
Some of us might not be physically in some of our office space, but we are still working. We're either working from home or remotely in some locations where we cannot be in our offices. For PAL example, we're in our offices, but just not open to the public. So it can be a little different for every county and every office, but we are open to the public. We're here answering questions, a lot through email, a lot through phone calls. We can do a lot with pictures and that type of thing. So please reach out to us. We are eager, willing to help. We're here to help you through this time and others. So yeah, reach out to us here at our county offices. That's a good URL. Look those up. Get in touch with us. The last thing that I'd like to mention is for those of you that are on the Zoom meeting with us, you will be prompted with an evaluation in your web browser once this session is closed. If you can take a few minutes and give us some feedback through that, we really appreciate it. It really helps us kind of guide this program. This is a new effort for us. We really appreciate it. I believe Jenny's going to drop a URL in the comments for those on Facebook Live, and you can feed us some input and evaluation on how we're doing here. So we really like to hear back from you. But at this point, I'd like to just say thank you, Catherine. Thanks for taking the time and helping educate us on this topic. Thanks for everybody joining us. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks everybody for joining us.